This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. We turn now to India, where officials say 6 major cities are coronavirus infection hotspots, calling them red zones, including the capital, New Delhi, and the financial center, Mumbai. The country has more than 420 deaths, 12,000 infections, though the number is likely far higher due to lack of testing. This comes as press freedom and civil liberties groups are sounding the alarm that the government of Narendra Modi is using the coronavirus outbreak to crack down on opponents and dissidents. This month, police arrested a prominent journalist, Siddharth Varadandram, accusing him of spreading discord and rumors after he reportedly criticized a Hindu nationalist politician for participating in a religious ceremony with dozens of people during the national lockdown. Elsewhere, activist Anand Talamde, who is 69 years old, and journalist Gautam Navlaka, who is 67, were arrested Tuesday over charges they both say were fabricated. Talamde wrote an open letter to the people of India on the eve of his arrest saying, quote, "I do not know when I shall be able to talk to you again. However, I earnestly hope that you will speak out before your turn comes," he said. Prime Minister Modi has announced India's nationwide coronavirus lockdown affecting 1.3 billion people, the largest at any time in the world, announced it'll be extended until May. In Mumbai, hundreds of migrant workers left homeless and unemployed by the lockdown held a protest Tuesday, demanding the government deliver food and assistance.
We are not getting anything here. The government promised to provide money and other amenities, but nothing has been delivered yet.
We have nothing to do now. We have small kids and they are not getting anything to eat. What should we do?
For more, we go to New Delhi, India, where we're joined by the award-winning writer, author, activist Arundhati Roy. She has a new essay in the Financial Times headlined, "The Pandemic is a Portal." It's drawn from her forthcoming book, Azadi, Freedom, Fascism, Fiction. Her most recent book is My Seditious Heart, collected nonfiction. She won the Booker Prize in 1997 for her first novel, The God of Small Things. Arundhati, welcome back to Democracy Now! As you speak to us from New Delhi, if you can talk about what's happening there and why you see the pandemic as a portal.
Well, in India, we have a COVID crisis whose contours we don't know yet. I mean, you mentioned the figures and also the fact that we don't know if they're reliable because there's not that much testing happening. But on the other hand, just looking around, that there isn't a run on hospitals like there has been in New York. The disease doesn't seem to have really got its claws into us yet. But we have the COVID crisis, we have a hunger crisis, we have a hatred crisis, and we have a health crisis apart from COVID. So, as you said, on the 24th of March, with 4 hours notice, which ran between 8 o'clock at night and 12 midnight, Modi locked down this nation of 1.38 billion people without warning. And the crisis that has created, the lack of planning, the lack of thinking forward, although like some states like Kerala, which you talked about, have done wonderful work, but from the center, the crisis has been exacerbated into something that might really become even more serious than the epidemic that it's planning for. You have a situation where you have millions of workers and migrant workers under a lockdown, which is supposed to enforce social distancing, but it only enforces physical compression. People are crammed together. People are separated from their families. In many places, they have no food. They have no access to money even. They've sold their phones. You have the sense that you're sitting on some kind of explosive substance. And yet at the same time, like you said, arrests are being made. Not just the people who you mentioned. Siddharth Varadarajan has not been arrested, the editor of Wire, but he has a case filed against him. Senior lawyers who speak out against Modi have had FIRs filed against them. Gautam Navlakha and Anantal Dumde have been arrested. Young students and people, a lot of Muslims who are now being accused of being part of the massacre that took place against Muslims in Northeast Delhi are being arrested. The circles are closing in. And the reason I said that the pandemic is a portal is that all over the world you have a situation now where, on the one hand, the powers that be are going to try and increase surveillance, increase inequality, increase privatization, increase control. And on the other hand, you have populations of people who will want to increase solidarity and who will want to see and understand the fact that what has happened in the US as well as what has happened in India is that the pandemic has exposed structural problems of such egregious injustice and inequality. Even the calling of the shutdown in 4 hours notice was a sign of panic from this prime minister, because he knows that this infrastructure of this country, it can't even deal with normality. Forget about a pandemic.
And Arundhati, I want to ask you more about that, about Modi's declaration, this of a lockdown with just 4 hours notice. He declared it at 8 p.m. and it went into effect at midnight on March 24th. But the first case, reported case of COVID-19 was on January 30th. So it's unclear why he's took 7 weeks to shut down the country. But you went when the country went into lockdown. You used a press pass and you went and spoke to some of the migrants, the hundreds of thousands of people who were forced to flee Delhi once all transportation had already been shut down. You spoke to some of these migrants in Delhi. Can you tell us what they said about their situation?
Well, as soon as the lockdown was announced, mass transport was stopped. It was the last week of March. People had not been paid their salaries. People who live virtually from day to day. The landlords in these little cramped medieval tenements into which 5 and 10 people are squashed into a room, said that they wanted their rent on time. So people just had to leave, and it was a surreal sight, while there was no traffic on the streets, but suddenly, the structural inequality and the horror, the shame of how our societies live made themselves manifest, and I just realized that these people have started walking for hundreds of kilometers to their villages. And I went out because I felt like the tectonic plates were shifting, it was crazy. So I went to the border between Delhi and Uttar Pradesh, where I walked with many of them, and I spoke to many of them, including Muslims who had just survived this horrific kind of wannabe pogrom against them, which didn't turn out that way because people were so prepared that they fought back. But having survived that, now they were walking these hundreds of miles home, all, carpenters, tailors, construction workers. And all of them were aware of the virus. All of them were wearing masks. They were doing their best to maintain social distance. It was impossible. There was a rumor that buses might be organized, and suddenly like 100,000 people were there together, pressed together, waiting for buses. And I asked some of them, so, what do you think of this virus? They said, whatever we think of the virus, right now we have no food, we have no water, we have nowhere to sleep, we have to reach home. And that was so much more present for them than this. A lot of them felt that, this was a rich people's illness brought in by planes. Why didn't they stop people at the airport instead of kicking us out of our jobs and our homes, And a lot of people one of the people who I wrote about in the Financial Times piece he just said to me, Shayad Modi ji ko hamare bare mein pata nahi, meaning maybe Modi doesn't know about us, which was just perhaps true in a way, that the government, and everybody else who controls anything in this society has more or less airbrushed the poor out of their imagination, out of films, out of literature, out of everything, except NGO brochures where the poor feature in order to raise money,
Arundhati, I wanted to ask you about President Trump's critical trip to India right at the time the pandemic was exploding. The famous pictures of them shaking hands, the stadium of 100,000 people. When President...
No, 1 million people.
Oh, sorry.
In India, and it was 1 million people.
So
in the U.S., it was 50,000, yeah.
So as President Trump took off and was flying back to the United States, it was then that he read the comments of U.S. scientists talking about the effects of the pandemic and what will mean in the United States. He was so enraged by what she had to say that he canceled a meeting of scientists when he was returning in retaliation. And then you have this whole relationship with India around hydroxychloroquine, what Dr. Trump, and I'm saying that very facetiously, President Trump has been pushing hydroxychloroquine because Narendra Modi said he was going to crack down on exports of this drug until President Trump pressured him. And now one study after another is coming out saying people are dying in the studies around hydroxychloroquine. Just overall, talk about what Trump has meant for Modi and what Modi means for Trump, this U.S.-India alliance and what it's doing in your country.
Well, it is giving such a great amount of legitimacy to a situation which I can't hardly explain, Amy, on TV, because I've been writing about this for so long, and what I said earlier, the crisis of hunger, and then the crisis of hatred. So the time Modi came to the U.S. and did the Howdy Modi show, and then when Trump came here, and it was the Namaste Trump and so on, this sort of bizarre dance between these two, I'm sorry to say, but not very intelligent human beings, but very, very powerful people who are legitimizing the horror of what is happening in the U.S. with immigrants, with racism, with undocumented workers, and the horror of what the BJP regime, the RSS, which is the mothership of the BJP cultural guild to which Modi belongs, which believes that India should be a Hindu nation and that everyone else should be second-class citizens, towards which they have made new citizenship laws and are building detention centers. And all of this is being legitimized by this idea that the most powerful country in the world and the most powerful man in the world loves Modi, and between them, it's a tragedy for the world that this particular pandemic has arrived at a time when country after country is controlled by people like this, which is why I said it's a portal, because are we gonna sleepwalk into this fascist surveillance state that everyone has in store for us? I mean, the app called the Arogya Setu app, which Modi has asked people to download and became the fastest downloaded app in the world. We have 50 million downloads now. I mean, every technical expert says it's just a surveillance app, and all various, so many democratic societies are moving towards this in this panic and fear that has been created. And there are so many things about the coronavirus, so many heartwarming things. I was reading in the New York Times today how how it's creating solidarity between people in the US. I just saw a wonderful video of people thanking a Pakistani doctor for having invented a mechanism that allows a single ventilator to be shared by many. But here you have Muslims being blamed for corona. There's the whole concept of corona jihad. And I've been reading of how in the 1930s, the Nazi state basically blamed Jews for typhus and used it as a way of stigmatizing and ghettoizing Jews. The same thing is happening here with Muslims. You know, you have to hear the language that the mainstream media uses and people on the street, you know. So it's a extremely dangerous situation, which is being completely legitimized by Trump and by all these powerful people who meet and shake hands and refuse to see how this virus is going to move in and exacerbate inequalities, exacerbate injustice, and create a situation where they too are frightened because they know these millions of people hungry, starving. How are you going to deal with that anger? In India, I'll tell you how they're going to deal with it. They're going to try and divert it into an anti-Muslim rage, which is the only thing they do always. But at some point, you know, already things are exploding. People are, you know, burning shelters and so on. And the hunger is so urgent. It has to be addressed now. The granaries are full of food which is not being distributed. You know, people need cash transfers, but they don't have bank accounts or they don't have access to their bank accounts. It's a crisis which you feel you're sitting on some kind of explosive substance right now. And, you know, as it deepens, once you distribute that grain, where will the next batch of food come from? Because right now is the harvest season. And, you know, people are, even those who are being able to harvest are not being able to sell. And you know, the whole cropping pattern of this country has changed into
Arundhati, we have 10
crops.
seconds.
Yep. Tell me.
We just have, I want to thank you very much for being with us as we run out of time. We're going to link to your piece, The Pandemic as a Portal, that's in Foreign Policy. Arundhati Roy is next Thursday, April 23rd, will be joining an online teach-in with Princeton professor Imani Perry and Haymarket Books on the Pandemic is a Portal. And we'll link to your essays as well at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is working with as few people on site as possible. A majority of our amazing team is working from home. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. Be safe.